Hello. This is a presentation for people who are completely new to Photoshop. We're going to be answering these questions. What is it? What does it do? And whether or not it's the right tool for you. Perhaps you've heard of Photoshop and wonder what it does that's different to free online apps such as Canva. Or maybe you want to try digital editing software for the first time. This presentation is going to cover the basics. So, Photoshop. Chances are, if you've never used Photoshop, you'll have heard of it. It's slipped into our language as a verb, with people often talking about images that have been photoshopped. These are images that have been edited, such as colourful kitten images, or magazine covers where a model or celebrity has been slimmed down or given a smooth airbrush skin, that we're starting to use Photoshop now as a generic verb. Photoshop was first released as a tool for photographers as an alternative to a darkroom, and it's developed massively over the years. And while it's still produced pretty much for photographers, designers and digital artists, it can be a really useful tool for creative small business owners too. You can use it to make small adjustments to improve the appearance of a photo, or you could use it to produce complete graphics, for example store banners, promotional graphics or adverts. So, let's open up Photoshop and take a look at what it actually looks like. Don't worry about the different tools and options at this stage. We'll look at those in a little more detail in the second presentation. I'm going to look at some of the ways sellers can use Photoshop in their business. Obviously, editing photos is one of the key reasons why sellers use Photoshop. Here's a really good example of how a photo can be enhanced. A while ago, I wrote a tutorial showing how to make a shrink plastic ring. The finished image was dull with a pink overcast on it. I hadn't set the white balance correctly in my camera. Here you can see I've split the image horizontally so you can see the original image at the top and how it's been enhanced below. Not only has the image been brightened and the contrast increased, but the colour cast, that the pink overtones have been significantly reduced, so the white background looks white and bright. In a perfect world, your photos would come out of the camera looking perfect, but here you can see how you can dramatically improve imperfect images to make them show your products to your customers in the best light possible. Layers. Layers are at the heart of Photoshop, and these are what makes Photoshop and other software packages which use layers so powerful. While layers didn't arrive in Photoshop until version 3, they're pretty much a fundamental part of the software now. They're used in everything other than the most basic of editing operations. So, what are layers? The clue's in the name. Layers are quite literally transparent sheets which are layered on top of each other, and each layer will adjust the final image, whether it's by adding text, changing a colour, or in a plethora of other ways. Each layer can have a different element and can be manipulated separately to other layers without affecting each other. If you've seen footage of early Walt Disney cartoons, you'll have some idea of how layers work. They're very much like sheets of acetate upon which images can be placed or painted, and then they're finally composited to form a complete final image. You can turn layers on and off, so you can quickly and easily create different versions of the same image. Let's go back to the shrink plastic ring. To the bottom right, you can see the layers window, the panel, and the original photo at the bottom. You may not be able to make out all the labels of the layers, but you'll see how we used a variety of layers to finally adjust the image. Let's look at a real example. Here you can see that the image is on layer 0. Now you'll see when we add some text to this image, a new layer is formed, layer 1, and we can see it on the layer palette, on the layer panel here. I need to adjust the size of the text, so I'm going to use the free transform tool, but I could obviously change the size of the text in the text box. And I'm going to stretch it over and place it where I want on the image. And you will see that on the layer, the name of the layer has now changed to reflect the text in the text box. Now we're going to add another image. We're going to place an image on top of the current image. I'm going to find another monster, and I'm going to put her in place. And as you can see, because we're using PNG files with transparent backgrounds, and because I've layered them on top of each other, the images can overlap slightly as I like. I'm now going to place a texture behind the monsters, a watercolour paper texture. Now you'll see the texture's gone to the top, so we can't see the monsters. So it's simply a case of pulling the texture layer to the bottom, and that we can see the monsters again and the text. We've only got a few layers here. However, if we were working on a really complicated project where we had lots of different layers, we could group the layers together simply by highlighting the layers and putting them into a group, as I've done here. This group contains the two monsters and the text. So now, rather than working on each layer independently, if I want, I can work on the group as a whole. Here I'm going to change the blending mode. So instead of the images looking like they're superimposed onto the textured background, they're going to blend using the multiply feature, so that they blend with the textured background and they look like they've been created directly onto watercolour paper. We said at the beginning how layers could be used to adjust an image without actually changing the base image, and here we're going to apply an adjustment layer. I'm going to apply a layer that will change the hue and saturation of the image. You'll see there's a bar at the top called hue, and I can pull this from left to right and it will change the colours of the images. It goes from greens and blues at one end through to pink and purple in the middles and back to the blues. Now, as you'll see, that this hasn't affected the base image, I can turn off all the individual layers and we'll get back to our very original image. So you can see how this is a great way to change your images and adjust your images without actually affecting your original photograph. As a seller, you may also want to enhance photos of people. If you don't use a professional photographer or model to model and photograph your products, you may need to enhance the photo, perhaps to reduce red eye or to enhance the smoothness of the skin, so the model is the best possible backdrop for your products. You may also want to enhance photos of yourself, either if you're modelling your own products or for profile photos. Yep, I'll admit that I've been known to work a little Photoshop magic on my own photos. I'm not naturally photogenic and I'm prone to blotchy skin during the summer, so a little manipulating gives me the confidence to model my own jewellery. And here's a little Photoshop magic of a different type on a portrait of my husband. So you can see that we can use Photoshop to enhance an image or simply to make it funny. I'll leave you to guess which is which from the examples I've just shown. Another way that we can use Photoshop as sellers is to create mock-ups of products. In this example, you will see how we've used Photoshop to replicate a single earring to create a product preview which shows two earrings. We took a photo of the earring on the left of the display and a photo of the earring on the right of the display, and then put the two together by cutting one of the earrings out and layering it to create a finished image. Another way that we can use Photoshop to create product previews is to create mock-ups of digital products. Think of the way that e-books are displayed. They are typically shown as real books, and this is often done using Photoshop templates. Here's my example using a free for commercial use template from Graphic Burger. This is a really great way to show an ebook or some other digital product as it has some substance, and to demonstrate to customers that it's a book, albeit in digital form, that they are getting. Take a look at Google and search for mock-ups, and you'll find that there's a range of mock-ups of different types, both free and paid for, that you can add your own artwork to. Photoshop can also be used to create mock-ups of other items too, such as t-shirts and mugs. While you can create mock-ups by layering some text or an image onto a blank background, you will need to use software with relatively sophisticated features to make your mock-up look realistic. If you look closely at this t-shirt mock-up, you'll see that the text flows around the creases of the t-shirt and has a realistic feel. Here's another example, and we can see why you want to use some of the power of Photoshop, in this case a feature called displacement maps, to curve the text around the mug. The image on the left looks as though the text has just been dropped onto the mug. It looks unreal. However, on the right, we've used a simple technique to curve the text around the mug so it looks authentic, and that potential customers can imagine how it's going to look in real life. We spoke briefly before about the blending feature, the feature that we used to blend the monsters so they looked as though they were actually on the watercolour paper. If you look at the card on the left, I've applied a design that has a solid white background. Because the card itself isn't pure white, it's quite obvious that this design has been superimposed onto the front of the card. The card to the right has had the blending mode, so that the design blends into the background and has a much more realistic and natural feel. People might also want to consider using Photoshop to colour images, as I've done here. If you sell digital stamps or colouring pages, you might want to let people know, get an idea of what the finished image will look like. And yes, of course, you can colour it using paints or pens and do it in the traditional way, or a quick and easy way is to do this using Photoshop. Of course, Photoshop can also be a great tool for creating different materials for your business. We already saw that we can make adverts using it, but you can also make things like business cards, mock-ups, and a range of other things. Finally, a really useful tool that Photoshop has is the ability to be able to save actions or macros that you can run automatically on a batch of images. For example, you could set an action to improve the exposure of hundreds of thousands of photos in a folder and then run them and leave it to run while you're off doing different things. You could make an action that resized photos if you wanted to resize a group of photos for social media. You will also find different actions and styles that you can pay for that will do clever things. For example, create watercolor effects on your images, or give you gold text. The range is really limited only by your imagination and perhaps budget. So, is Photoshop the right tool for you? Photoshop is undoubtedly the most well-known of the image editing applications, but with various other applications available, it's well worth considering your options before committing to it. You can download a free trial from Adobe that you can use for 30 days before deciding whether to purchase it, so this would be handy if you're not quite sure what to do. If you don't buy, at the moment you don't buy Photoshop, you essentially rent it as part of Adobe Creative Cloud. At the moment, you don't buy Photoshop, you essentially rent it as part of Adobe Creative Cloud. So you pay a monthly fee, not a one-off payment. Adobe offer Photoshop along with Lightroom as a package for photographers, and signing up to this will cost you just $9.99 a month. You don't have to be a photographer to take advantage of this. It was primarily designed to make it affordable for enthusiasts and hobbyists. As a powerful and useful business tool, it's not much to commit to paying on a monthly basis. However, you could pay less for similar tools. In fact, you could pay nothing. What are the alternatives? The very first alternative to Photoshop is a Photoshop product, Photoshop Elements. It's a cut-down version of the software, and that it will probably be powerful enough for most users. The current version, version 14, will cost you $99 in the US. So about 10 months subscription, about 10 months of the full subscription. That sounds good, but the downside is you won't get any free upgrades. Every time a new feature is added to Photoshop, subscribers automatically receive it. With Elements, new features are only added when a new version is released, and you have to pay for upgrades. Some other alternatives that you could pay for include Serif's Windows-only Photo Plus at $94.99, and they also sell a Mac-only Affinity Photo for $49.99, but that's more of a Lightroom alternative. Corel also offer a Windows-only PaintShop Pro at $79.99. You don't have to pay money though if you don't want to, thanks to the open source movement. The two best known options are GIMP and Paint.net, the latter for Windows only. You can download both of these completely free of charge. Paint.net is the less powerful of the two, but also the easier to learn as a result, and if your requirements aren't too demanding. It could be a good fit for your business and a great way to get started with photo editing software. GIMP is markedly more powerful, but it has a relatively steep learning curve. Many Photoshop users are generally very negative about GIMP, but if you take a little time to learn it, you'll see that it is a very impressive application considering the zero cost of ownership. It lacks the full power of Photoshop, but then again, it lacks the full price. If you have a fast and reliable internet connection, there are also some free web apps you might consider. For example, Be Funky, and another that you may well know of is Canva, which is probably more for layouts, although it does include some simple image editing tools. We have a comparison sheet that you can download below that will give you some the pros and cons of the different software options that we've spoken about. So all that remains is for me to say thank you very much for watching this video. There's another couple of videos that will help you get started. I hope these have been useful, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye.